Thank you. We move on now to our next session, the road to US $5 trillion economy. The video, please. We have very distinguished panelists for this discussion. We start off with Uday Kotak. Shri Uday Kotak is the founder and MD and CEO of Kotak Mahindra Bank Limited. The network of Kotak Mahindra Bank Group is over 84,300 crores. Uday's vision for equitable prosperity extends beyond financial services. The Kotak Education Foundation works with some of India's most economically underprivileged communities, attempting to alleviate poverty through education and livelihood programs. In June 2020, Mr. Kotak took charge as president of Confederation of Indian Industry. And in September 2020, he was reappointed as co-chairman of Indo-UK Financial Partnership, constituted by the Ministry of Finance, Government of India and UK Treasury. Also in September 2020, the Government of India renewed Mr. Kotak's appointment as the non-executive chairman of the new IL and FS board, with a mandate to steer one of India's largest NBFCs out of the crisis that it is caught up in. He is a member of the Insolvency Law Committee and the Company Law Committee on Decriminalization of the Limited Liability Partnership Act 2008. Udayji is also the recipient of numerous awards. We welcome him as one of our panelists today. Our next panelist, Mr. Ramdev Agrawal. Ramdev Agrawal, chairman and co-founder of the Motilal Oswal Group, is the driving force behind the company's approach to investing. As chairman of its asset management business, Motilal Oswal Asset Management Company, Ramdevji has framed the QGLP, that's Quality Growth Longevity and Favorable Price investment framework, and its buy right, sit tight investing philosophy. Ramdev is also an associate of Chartered Accountants of India, associate of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and a member of the National Committee on Capital Markets of the Confederation of Indian Industry. In 1986, he wrote book Corporate Numbers Game along with co-author Ram K. Piparia. He has also authored the book The Art of Wealth Creation. Ramdevji has been awarded the Rashtriya Samman Patra by Central Board of Direct Taxes for a consistent track record of highest integrity. And he has also been awarded as Chhattisgarh Citizen of the Year in 2018. Welcome, Mr. Agrawal. Well, today, our next panelist, and of course, our moderator for this session, is one of the most popular Indian journalists and news anchors of our time. We are so lucky to have her here today. Shireen Ban is who I am talking about. Shireen currently serves as the managing editor of CNBC TV 18. She has over 15 years of experience tracking corporate policy news and events that define the business landscape in India. She has been responsible for breaking a range of news stories that have redefined the Indian economic landscape in recent times, and has also interviewed some of the biggest names in the business and politics, both domestic and global. She has also received numerous industry awards, such as the Best Business Anchor Award at the News Television Awards, the FICCI Woman of the Year Award, and was even named a young global leader by the World Economic Forum. We are so happy to have you here, Shireen. Please take it away.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that very warm, lovely introduction. Good afternoon. Well, it's still not afternoon just yet, but thank you to everybody for joining in on a Sunday. I know this is hard, and I know we're all pretty done with Zoom calls and Zoom meetings, but I hope that this is going to be an engaging and an enriching conversation. Mr. Kotak is somebody that I've had the occasion to speak with on numerous occasions, and I have to say, what I appreciate about him is the fact that he's always well prepared ahead of every single interview that we've ever done. And that is not something that I can say about a lot of people who have had the opportunity to interview. So it always is a conversation that I come away learning something, taking something away from that conversation. Ramdev, equally, as is the case with Mr. Kotak, he's been somebody who's been on the channel over the last 20 years. He's been part of the CNBC TV 18 journey. He's been part of the Indian Dalal Street story as well. And he's always been kind and generous with his time and his thoughts and his views. So Mr. Kotak and Ramdev, thanks very much for joining us here on this conversation. Let's get straight to it. At this point in time, we are seeing what's happening with the economy, but more importantly, we are seeing what's happening on account of COVID and the health crisis that we're dealing with. So whether we achieve 5 trillion by 2025 or not, is it feasible? Is it doable? Is it practical? I don't think that is the question that we need to address today. The question I believe that we need to address today as a nation, as a society, is whether that's really the right ambition. And I'll ask you that in the context of what we are seeing happen in India. We are the world's second most populous nation. We are the 5th largest economy on a nominal basis, but we're also 133rd on the Human Development Index. If you take a look at the purchasing power parity, an Indian earns about $6,668 a year compared to $7,433 by a Vietnamese, $19,160 by a Mexican, $14,263 by a Brazilian, $16,057 by a Chinese. So the question that I'm raising here today is that what should be the right ambition, the right priority for India? Mr. Kotak, perhaps you can start with that and your introductory comments as well.
Thank you, Shireen. First of all, I would like to thank Ashish and Mayuri Bhasin, friends of the family, for inviting me on this platform today. Mayuri is a close friend of my wife, Pallavi, and I genuinely appreciate inviting me today. So, Mayuri, thank you very much and delighted to be here. Shireen, you and I have chatted about this quite often, and I genuinely feel there are 3 or 4 important points India really needs to get its focus on. First, I would like to see our country built on knowledge, expertise, science, and research. We need to move away from ad hocism, things which make here and now interesting bites, but are fundamentally not sustaining the change of a country. Therefore, we really need to take our decisions based on knowledge and increase the power of knowledge to the core of who we are. So I think that is one major point which we need to keep in mind. Second, let us get our priorities right. 3 very important things. And I know I'm speaking at a Rotary event, Rotary stands for values which are quite unique. My father has been a Rotarian. I've been given some sort of a position in the Rotary in my father's club. So I know what it means. And I would really like 3 major areas where we invest. One is healthcare. Second is education. And third is Mother Nature. These 3 should be our priorities if we are going to leave behind a better generation for our future than we are today. Third, I think we need to transform the new opportunities coming in the post-COVID world. The world has changed, okay? And therefore, new opportunities are coming. Something which I have discussed with you, I've said geography has become history. India can be the office of the world. We can change the destiny of our country in the new world. There is a very big opportunity for a rural-urban divide to be reduced. So that is the third point which I would strongly say. And fourth, I think the important point is importance of institutions to sustain our country. And we need to strengthen the foundations. Our founding fathers and the British left behind an institutional legacy. Over time, we have to ensure that these areas do not become nice words, but the underlying reality has changed. And I'm sure you're going through some challenges in various segments of the society. Therefore, whether it is our judicial institutions, whether it is our governance institutions, both at the central and the state governments, whether it's our civil society institutions, whether it is our regulatory institutions, we need to ensure that the foundations are stronger and they are also reinventing themselves for the new world. The processes which worked for us in the past won't work in the future. And these fundamental changes are something which I would deeply like we as society to engage in.
Yeah, you're absolutely right in pointing out that healthcare, education, and Mother Nature, as you call it, largely issues around climate. are issues that we need to grapple with and address. And unfortunately, these are not issues that get prioritized. I mean, if you look consistently at allocations, budgetary allocations on issues like healthcare and education, they're paltry compared to the size of the problem and the challenge. But Ramdev, let me come to you and take that point forward. As Mr. Kotak was talking about, we need to move away from this tendency of relying on ad hocism. And we've sort of, almost institutionalized this jugaad philosophy in India and made it look like it's something that we must bank on. It is something we must perpetuate. And unfortunately, while in many ways it does help us out of a pickle often, it belittles institutions of the kind that Mr. Kotak was speaking of. It perpetuates ad hocism. Do we need to move away from this jugaad philosophy now to a much more robust, knowledge-driven, consultative, science-driven, research-driven, approach, Ramdev?
Good morning, friends, and really it's a pleasure to be invited by Rotary. A friend of mine, Chef Kulesi, he invited me, so thanks very much for this prestigious platform. So now coming back to today's question, some of the new things which I was reading more recently, where is the opportunity? One of the thought which came to my mind, which really completely stumbled me, and why there is a massive inflation in the world. Inflationary pressures are building up, and yet the bond yields are at the rock bottom, and why they're not responding. So then I was thinking and thinking and thinking, then whatever in little way I could think of, then I stumbled across, is there abundance of capital in the world? Complete superabundance of the world. And then I Googled, I found one article on superabundance of the world. And that kind of fundamentally in a poor country like India has a huge meaning. The world is one, the world is completely borderless. It is superabundance of the world, superabundance of capital, and all the problems which start, first problem is the poverty. The mother of all the problems is poverty. So that GDP growth rate or per capita income growth or equality of income distribution, that you cannot take it away unless you create wealth in the economy. All the problems you might talk, it will have very empty promises till we really generate wealth. The wealth generating machine must not be disrupted. We must manage in such a way. Natural disasters will come, challenges will come, nothing goes straight line. But when these things come, we must not disrupt the economy because it's a huge complex machine. And whenever we disrupt on our own, I think it finds the balance going away. And multiple times, then literally the story goes off the track. So what I would say is, in this new environment of superabundance global capital, and it is increasing by the day, by the month, India has a very unique opportunity with digital prowess, democracy, and the youngest population, and all kinds of opportunity India has. And best of all, we are poor and hardworking, and using the global capital. But how do we make it happen? And that's where I think thinking must happen. We must not disrupt. We must facilitate. And the sectors which which is talked about. But I think one of the sector which is very ignored in this country is the judiciary. Reforms in judiciary. It is actually, you don't need foreign capital, you don't need foreign technology, but judiciary can be reformed big time with the digital help. I think that one reform can be very, very impactful in the years to come, apart from many other steps which Mr. Kotak has also suggested. But I would like to hear his views on the superabundance of global capital. What is the roadmap, and how do we encash on that? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ramdev. And I know that this is something that Mr. Kotak will have lots to say about. But, I just wanted to pick up on what you said, Ramdev, that we must not do things that disrupt the economy. What, to your mind, have been the big disruptions? Would you consider the biggest disruption starting from demonetization in 2016? And of course, then the lockdowns and so on and so forth, you can argue on whether the timing, the kind of lockdown and so on and so forth. But what do you believe have been the disruptive triggers to the Indian economy?
So Shri,
that we need to be mindful and avoid?
Yeah. So external disturbances will come in the economy. That is out of your hand. Like any family, any business, disruptions will come from outside. But when those disruptions come or challenges come, we should respond in a very smooth way. You see the response from the first wave and second wave. In first wave, there was no COVID. COVID was just about few thousand cases. It was just about arriving. There were no deaths. There was nothing. But the response was very disruptive. In second one, you have 400,000 cases, highest in the world. Real calamity here, human tragedy. And yet response is very different. Economic response. Like that, I mean, whatever was the advisory for the earlier time, like just in 3-4 years, we have a lot of disruptions, which are, kind of demonetization also. I would say, I mean, whatever is the, thinking at the policymakers level, and whatever was the thought, but I think there would have been much better way to search solution to the problem. I mean, definitely there must have been some problem which this was the solution. But I think disrupting the nation of this complexity is, and this largeness, this and such low availability of resources. So when poor houses are disrupted, I mean, they never come back. So for a nation of this type, if we keep disrupting, we'll not allow the momentum to build. Like say in March, we got collection of 141,000 crores of GST collection. So momentum is building in the economy because there is a natural impetus in the economy. All kinds of things are there. So once this momentum builds, the moment you break, it's like breaking the party. When party at the full swing, you break it, you cannot reorganize. It takes a lot of time. So, I mean, this is a party time for India actually. But what I'm saying is we must not disrupt. I mean, I don't know whether I'm able to communicate that.
No, I get the point that you're making, Ramdev, and I think it ties in with the point that Mr. Kotak was making on not being reactive in our policy approach and staying away from ad hocism. But Mr. Kotak, to the point that Ramdev made there on the superabundance of capital, and this has been the way of the world now for the last several years, and emerging markets like India have benefited. But to Ramdev's point, that given where we currently stand, and the opportunities as well as the advantages that we can build on, how do we ensure that this capital, both domestic and foreign, largely foreign, makes its way here?
Thank you, Shireen. I think what we have to be clear is what is the reason for abundance of capital. One is, of course, significant productivity growth in the world. But second is, particularly in the COVID period, the mother of all providers, the reserve currency called the US dollar, decided that it did not need to print money or create money in terms of helicopter money, which Ben Bernanke talked about, but they decided to do rockets full of money. Okay. So the world has been made awash by printing currency, which in the short run to counter the pandemic is probably the right thing. And I've used this phrase, it is like a steroid, which we've all now seen how steroids are used. But what we have to be careful about steroids is that they have to be controlled and they have to be short term. They cannot be a long-term way of doing things. Therefore, this abundance of capital is coming because the world has been awash with money created through steroids. Now, that is not going to remain forever. Therefore, even as we enjoy the fruits of this excess liquidity, I would strongly advise governments and companies to go out and raise bucketfuls, tubfuls of capital while the liquidity is in abundance. Okay? And there will come a time when this has to have a price somewhere, what I call as the wolf of inflation. It may not come in 21, it may come in 22 or 23. But when it comes, there will be a withdrawal of steroids. And it is at some point of time a reality. And how are we going to cope up with this so-called abundance of created money gradually going out? Therefore, we need to be prepared for both. Take advantage of the liquidity, which I think Ramdev is absolutely right. Capitalize balance sheets, get all the capital you want for growth and transform India. But be ready for a time when the steroids are withdrawn and there are no diseases which are left behind after that.
Yes, you're right. And, as I point out it's a great comment that you make, that steroids should only be used judiciously in the short term, and they cannot be something that you depend on in perpetuity, whether it's for the economy or for health. I mean, India is at this point in time the only country that's faced the crisis of black fungus, and perhaps it also has to do with the overzealous use of steroids. We don't know. This is a matter under investigation. But let me go back across to Ramdev. Ramdev, speaking of steroids, I mean, let's talk about what's happening with the markets. I mean, here we're talking about, 5 trillion as far as the economy is concerned by 2025. But who would have thought the Indian stock markets would completely ignore what is happening as far as the economy is concerned, would ignore what is happening with COVID, especially in the second wave of COVID, and would be hitting new record highs. What's going on there? What is that story telling you?
Yeah, so it is interconnected with this abundance of capital. What has happened is, like, if you produce too much of tomato in the world, it's not about only this time. It is not about this time only. This is going on for last maybe 50 years. And now we have reached from abundance to superabundance. So market cap to GDP in US used to be about 25-30 way back in 20s and 30s. That started climbing, and market cap to GDP in 2008 for the first time touched 1 time. So the GDP of US was about $12 trillion, and market cap also reached $12 trillion. Now, then from there it crashed and started recovering. The longest bull run we had was between 2009 and today. Today, market cap of GDP, market cap of US, hold your breath, is over 45 trillion on a GDP of 21 trillion. So we are climbing it more than 2 times and going very strong, So this is not of course, there will be a resurgence of inflation, and there will be correction. There will be deep correction. But now, even if it goes down by 50%, market cap to GDP bottom will be 1 time GDP. If 45 comes out to 22 trillion, which itself be a disaster, still you'll be 1 time. So now the top is maybe 2, 3, I don't know, but bottom will be 1 time. What used to be the earlier top? So what I'm saying is, we are in a different world already. There is so much of capital in Japan and Germany that 10-year paper is below par at minus 0.17 knot. So this is unprecedented thing which is happening with the global economy. Unfortunately, I'm not a global macroeconomist. I'm not able to put together why this phenomena is, but this is a super abundance of capital. That's the only word which can explain. And low cost capital and massive liquidity and globalized liquidity. And that is what is also telling the enterprises are far more valuable than what it was thought to be. So we all, my problem is that I'm 40 years in the market. So I have seen the enterprises available at 10p multiple, 13p multiple, 15p multiple. Today, the same enterprises, they are so glorious. They are available at 40p multiple, 50p multiple, because the cost of money fundamentally has gone down, and availability money has just gone through the roof. So that's what is telling us today. And markets are about seeing the future. Jo dikhta hai, wo bikta hai. So they are seeing low price, low. Today's opinion is today's price. Tomorrow's opinion is tomorrow's price. Today's opinion is there is a lot of money. It is literally free, and any enterprise which is growing and which is well managed will be valued like literally any place. And speculation all over the world is at the peak. You see what is happening in cryptocurrency, what is happening in SPAC companies. So, now, last time in 2008, the excess liquidity showed up by way of mortgage boom in US. Now, this time it is showing up in the stock market boom in various forms, whether it is Tesla, whether it is cryptocurrency, whether it is SPACs, and I don't know what many more things are going to come. If you look at the central bankers, I see a trinity of 3 entities in the world: government, central bankers, and market / speculators. So now speculators are in full swing, markets are in full swing, and that is what is reflected in India also. That's how I rationalize the current situation.
Well, yes, as you point out, this is largely driven by the fact that we do have this superabundance of capital that you spoke of. But let me go back to Mr. Kotak. Mr. Kotak, you said that we're living in an era where the world has changed on account of COVID and its impact. So India needs to do the right things. Now, I want you to break that up for us. In the immediate term, in the short to medium term and the long term? What should be prioritized? And to take the points that Ramdeo made forward, between the Reserve Bank, the central government and the state governments, if we were to equate them as the trinity of three in our context, what do you believe is the immediate priority, the medium term priority, and the long term priority?
So I would separate the market from the economy. Okay, the market can have its own dance, and for investors, they can play to that dance and take the risks of that dance. It could be up, it could be down, and I'm sure all of them will watch you, Shireen, every day to figure out which way it's dancing on that day. So, and I'm sure you'll give a good picture of that. So let me go a little beyond the immediate dance of the markets. I think in terms of here and now, today, we have to find out a way to get out of the current situation where we have to get out of the lockdowns in the short run, here and now. Lockdowns have to be opened up gradually as we keep on vaccinating more. We also need to prepare for COVID 3.0 risk and make sure that this time around we have enough oxygen, medicines, hospital beds. God forbid something should happen again. We do not want a situation to lives and the risk to lives as we saw in COVID 2.0. And our preparation has to be for peak capacity. Average capacity on this does not work, because when the cases go up, you are short of everything. That will lead to some wastages. We should live with those wastages, but prepare this time around for excess capacity in medicine, oxygen, hospital beds, and gradually open the lockdowns as vaccination proceeds. So I would consider that as a plan from now to September. And we should do it systematically so that we are much better off than the rest from where we are. Second, I think the key focus has to be medium term. Let us look at simple opportunities. Today, this conference, it's all of us are speaking from wherever we are and participating. Why? What an opportunity for India. Of course, there's an opportunity for India in manufacturing to be the factory of the world, which China is. I think a bigger opportunity for India is to be the office of the world. Smallest village of India. We can create jobs, we can have skills, and we can have a person sitting in a village in India and work for Google globally. No visas, no travel, nothing. Can you imagine the amount of prosperity and job employment opportunity we can create with our cost of labor and professional people to compare to the rest of the world? We don't need to be only the back office of the world. We can be the front office of the world. The concept of a front office is a video screen. And that is our single biggest opportunity in history. Let us go out there and make this dream happen of India being the front office and the back office of the world. And the next point I would like to talk about is, even as we grow, we are seeing a very sharp K-shaped growth. Few people are benefiting disproportionately versus the larger society. This can go on only up to a point. There will come a time when there will be a backlash. And we have to start preparing for how are we going to create a more equitable growth. While continuing with the basic theory, we need more growth for increasing per capita. Therefore, growth has to happen. But we have to think about it in a more balanced manner, because whether we like it or not, we are a society where in the last 1 year, a large number of people have been taken out of the jobs or livelihood. Therefore, stock markets may keep on going up, which is a good thing. But how are we making sure that more and more Indians do not go below the poverty line? What about them? We cannot keep on living on the rejoice of only the capital markets. Capital markets may be efficient allocators of capital, but they are not necessarily efficient allocators for human tragedy and human livelihoods. And they are mercenary. If a company needs to remove jobs, capital markets will make companies remove those jobs. How are we broader as a society going to create those new jobs while having functioning and high quality capital markets and achieve both? It is a very difficult issue. And this is where we need expertise, public policy expertise in governments, in economic think tanks, in regulators, in research institutions. We have to manage both. It is no longer either or. It has to be both.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that, Mr. Kotak, because oftentimes, at least what we see when we talk about equitable growth is that people tend to, or at least a large part of corporate India tends to perceive measures that are directed towards the bottom of the pyramid as freebies. And that's not necessarily always true, and that's not necessarily always an accurate representation. So let me just take that point further with you before I get Ramdev to comment as well. Since you said that this is a K-shaped growth that we're seeing and that few people are benefiting disproportionately at this point in time, and there could be a backlash, what do you believe the government needs to do to ensure that the recovery is more equitable as well?
I think we need to find out. That's why I said this is an opportunity for bridging the urban-rural divide. This is an opportunity, therefore, for investing medium term. And I mentioned 3 points: climate change, or Mother Nature, as I used, education, healthcare. We need to invest in infrastructure. Government simultaneously, while it boosts consumption in the short run, has to invest in the long term, either itself or get private sector to make it worthwhile. Today, if you talk to private sector with reference to infrastructure investments, most of them say, listen, our problem is if state governments don't pay or central governments don't pay, we are at risk. We've had pretty difficult experiences. So create a framework and a platform where there is just an equitable respect for contracts. We need significant investment in making India as a country and Indian people more digitally educated. It is a duty we must do. We have to get innovation coming, in addition to building infrastructure. For me, the whole medium-term story of India is extremely important, not what I call as a quick fix solution because markets are going up. Markets are going up, it's good. It's a way for allocating capital, which is a great thing. But we must use the surplus on the markets. For example, government has a massive disinvestment program. It must complete it, take the money from the markets and use it sensibly. The other issue, which I think is a challenge, is governments must use the money which they get well. It should not be wasted or should not be used for populist things on a long-term basis. I understand the short-term needs, but long-term, we need to do what is right. And therefore, a very significant public policy focus to transform India into the right matrix for equitable growth is as much a part, because we have got to keep in mind, we are seeing tensions between center and the states. A federal structure of India has to hold up together over the next 5, 10, 15 years. So lots of moving pieces, hold the country together and do medium-term stuff well beyond short-termism.
Yes, I think this tendency to work on the quick fix solution as opposed to the medium or the long-term thinking has been a problem that we've had to face. But Ramdev, just to take the point that Mr. Kotak was making, and he's put several ideas and several challenges on the table. One, of course, is the federal structure. And he's right in pointing out that we have now seen tensions exacerbate. For instance, we're seeing that happen even within the GST Council, which so far has largely been driven by consensus. How would you address some of the issues that Mr. Kotak brought up, and what would you add to the table in terms of the short and medium term approach that the government needs to take?
So even economic thinking is going through revolutionary change, and this COVID has given by default a lot of impetus to new thinking. Like last year we were planning for 3.3% fiscal deficit. We ended up doing 9.5%, and still economy is functioning well in the sense that inflation is not some crazily out of hand or anything like that. So clearly there is a myth of deficit financing. So there's another concept which is picking up. Should you bother about your revenue base in terms of taxation, or should you be fine enough to be little more liberal with the deficit financing and achieve your objectives? So one of the thought process I was just trying to link with this was the reforms of the old industries, like mother industries, textile or cement, or these industries are, because they are sources of revenue in the past, government is doing incremental things for them, but they're scared of doing wholesale reform for the fear of revenue compulsions. Whenever you go to Delhi, They say because of revenue compulsions, we cannot bring down the cement excise duty from 28% to 80%. This is crazy. I mean, you're killing the mother industries, So I think we have to have a fundamental rethinking on what we are good at: mining, metals, your textiles, your construction, houses. I mean, this can be the housing capital of the world. Why can't it be housing capital of the world? There is no, I mean, housing is so difficult in India. So what I'm saying is the old industries where you don't need any foreign exchange and it is very labor intensive and it can be done just by the entrepreneurs themselves. I think the demand generation for all these products and services can mean a lot. I mean, what I think is that wherever demand is there, like education has huge demand for doing simple MBBS or doctor. People are now flying out to Singapore, Australia, wherever they can. The kids are being found all over the world. You go to Russia, so many kids are there who are doing medicine out there. So why we can't create medical colleges here? We can't create MBA schools here. I mean, we are teachers to the world. I mean, all the teachers are Indians out there, and we are not able to create enough schools and colleges here. So why we are not able to fundamentally solve the problem today? Maybe 10, 15, 20 billion dollars are being spent sending your brightest children to outside the world. So what I'm saying is we have to see where the problem is in the Indian economy. And of course, the new sectors are literally liberal. I mean, the governments don't come on the way of the new, like work from home. This is going to be a new phenomenon all over the world. World is going to become far more flat than ever before. So earlier, our software companies used to do 40-60. Say 60% of effort will be India and 40% will be there. Why can't be 95 and 5? I mean, the guy who is sitting in LA is also sitting at home and working, and the guy who is in Ludhiana, he's also sitting at home. So how does it matter? Why should Microsoft pay $200,000 when he can get it done for $20,000? And they are not fools; they will do it. So let the world open. It is going to be a different world with work from home. It will be far more flatter world. I don't think for now work is going to come to their desk. The desk doesn't have to go to the work. So what I'm saying is a lot of changes. I think government has to be far more imaginative in thinking for these things and solve all the old problems, and that will give a lot of impetus to the economy. That's what my thinking is.
Oh, and that's a good point that you make. But Mr. Kotak, we often tend to focus too much on what the government can do and what the government should do. Let me ask you, what about corporate India? What should corporate India be doing? I mean, corporate India hasn't covered itself in glory over the last few years. We've seen now a course correction in terms of cleaning up balance sheets and so on and so forth. But what should corporate India be focusing on as we move forward?
I think if you ask me, for India's image in the world today, corporate India has to do a lot more heavy lifting. Okay. And we have all got to work together in business, industry, and civil society to go out there and get India's image back and grow it further on the global stage. There are issues and challenges today. And in terms of what business can do, I think one of the finest pieces of legislation India has done, which it differentiates itself from the rest of the world, is CSR. It is basically saying 2% of your profits, give it back to society. And every business across India must do its bit and make sure CSR is purposeful and is validly used. Don't think about it as a tax. Think about it as an opportunity where the government of India is saying, instead of we government taking away your money as taxes and the government deciding allocation, we are trusting business to give it to the right people in society. I think steps like this go a long way in the long term. Corporate India has to rise beyond saying that, okay, we've got 25% tax rate. Now we can do what we want. It's good that we have a 25% tax rate, but we have to do our things right. We have to invest. Corporate India, okay, for COVID reasons or whatever, or capacity utilization, has not made significant investments in the last 2 or 3 years. We have to take some calls and have a conviction that investment at this stage will work for us in the future. Think about Mr. Jamshedji Tata. When he set up a steel plant in Jamshedpur, he didn't know what the future was going to be. He said, if India has to happen, people will need steel. So why can't business and industry take a view that over time, if we make the right investments and run our businesses properly, the investments will pay off. So that is second. So one is CSR and do it with your heart. Second is private investment. Take a call early. Don't wait after you get validation. And third is embrace ESG as the core to business's future. Environment, society, governance. We're covering this part of it through CSR. But let us be responsible. Good ESG governance by every player is good for society. And corporate governance, I think it's to the fore. Therefore, let's use these three. Take CSR seriously, make private investments boldly, and follow ESG to the T in letter and spirit.
Well, I do hope that is something that corporate India will listen to and take forward. But we've got the last 1 minute. So Ramdev, let me ask you, we've talked about the opportunities. Let me end by asking you to prioritize for us the top 3 risks that you believe we're dealing with.
Top 3 risks?
That we're dealing with.
Yeah, of course. Right now, the second wave, third wave, fourth wave, I mean, how exactly this is going to mutate and how actually it is going to come to an end. Even US, which is opening up full time, they still have 1,000 deaths per day. So it's not done. So in what way it can come back? And maybe it can nullify the whatever is the good effect of vaccines. And again, kind of a spread. I hear some of the countries where it has been 80% vaccinated. They again have gone into lockdown. So I don't think this. So we are into this right in the midst of it. I don't think we should be really sitting on our any kind of comfort zone. So this remains the biggest, single biggest this thing. Second is that how do we tackle it? This problem is in hand, but we should tackle it in such a way that it is not disruptive. So how imaginative we are in solving this problem. And third, longer term is really solving our problems from the roots. And one of the thoughts which came just before was the regulations. See, one of the things is that we are a developing country. We are the poorest country. We cannot take pride in saying that we are ahead of America, ahead of Europe in this climate change and so fancy things. I don't think we should be in that. We must recognize we are poor. We need. I mean, those guys, they have polluted the world, and now it is our turn to kind of not pollute, but buy time before you unnecessarily become this 6, 7, 8, 9 versions ahead of Europe and America. I don't think we are not Norway. We cannot afford that. So we have to be very calibrated in what we take it by regular, because that is also disruptive. That is very disruptive to the businesses. So we have to be in sync with the world, but not ahead of the developed world.
All right. I think that sums up the conversation on the short, the medium term and the long term opportunities and challenges that India is faced with. And hopefully we'll get to that $5 trillion aspiration by 2025, if that's really our target and that's our goal. But as each of our panelists here is very clearly articulated, it needs to be much more than that. It needs to be equitable, it needs to be fair, and it needs to be thought through. That's the approach that we need to take if India wants to become a global power that has growth going for it, but also does well on the Human Development Index. Mr. Kotak Ramdev, many thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you, and goodbye, and thank you all.